for coming.
All right. We have a really great show for you today. Before we get into our amazing guests, let's just kick it off with some news.
Yes, let's do that. So this is a shameless plug, but Kobold Press is having a promotion, a buy one and get some promotion. So if you buy now through December 15th, they are offering a special $100 gift certificate promotion. So if you purchase this $100 gift certificate, then you will receive $20 in return from Cobalt Press store in credit for yourself. Or you can buy a $50 gift certificate and then get $10 back. So that's kind of cool. So if you buy something for your family, you're also buying something for yourself. How very this generation. So that's starting now through December 15th. Cobalt Press is also coming out with something that looks incredibly interesting. It is a Kickstarter. You know how I love to promote Kickstarters. They have another expansion for their Southlands. It's a Southland sends Dungeons and Dragons to mythical Egypt. So that is going to be very interesting. I actually love ancient Egypt. AC AC Origins was my favorite Assassin's Creed because it was set in Egypt. So this is a new expansion that they have on Kickstarter. So go check that out.
All right. And then Atlas Games is going to be releasing Dice Miner in January. It's a new fantasy game from them. And I know there's a couple people in our chat who will appreciate this, but you will all be playing dwarves, battling dragons, trying to reclaim your ancient home. So, Tristan and Joey, who you always play dwarves, like this sounds perfect for you. Yeah, it's actually a pretty short game. You can play for about 20-30 minutes. But it sounds like a really interesting new addition that they're adding to, already a lot of the amazing games that they've put out. It's about drafting the dice you covet, adding them to your hoard, and then trying to build massive combos and score as many points as you can. So sounds like a great family game. Okay, so let's move on to why we're here. So our two guests today, we have James Introcaso, and then we have Chris Spivey, who are joining us because so many of you out there I know are really interested in understanding, how you can get into making tabletop games or, writing books about it and things like that. And these two guys are experts. So why don't we just have you introduce yourselves? James, let's start with you.
Sure, yeah. I'm James Introcaso. I am a game designer, podcaster, and blogger in the tabletop role-playing game space. In 2021, I'll be full-time game design with MCDM, which is Matt Colville's production company. Thank you. And I'm the creator of the Burn Bright role-playing game on Roll20, and I have contributed to a bunch of different Wizards of the Coast hardcover projects. I've worked with Kobold Press, who you mentioned up at the top of the show, Roll20, and a bunch of other people. So it's really, really fun and exciting to be here.
Yay.
Thanks for having me.
And Chris?
Well, thank you for coming on. Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Chris Spivey. I'm a veteran writer, game designer, Scotch lover, and a little bit about me. I guess I'm probably best well known for Harlem Unbound, which won 3 Gold Ennies. It's in a few museums. It's taught in some different universities. I'm also the vice president of the Game Manufacturing Association currently. I'm working as the line developer for Onyx Path, Mask of the Mythos. You can find some of my work in the upcoming Dune book, Chicago by Night, and a slew of other things. I'm just excited to be here.
Awesome.
We're excited to have you. So let's just start out with a question that we ask a lot of our guests, and that's, how did you guys get started in the industry, in the gaming industry?
So, I played for years and have like a very prototypical older brother played parents' basement kind of starting to play story.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to do a podcast during the 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons playtest. It was called the D&D Next playtest. It was this 2-year long thing. And at the time, there weren't a ton of role-playing game podcasts, especially that covered news and stuff. This was about 8 years ago. And I kept saying that I wanted to do it, and that I wanted to hear one, and maybe I should make one. And my wife said, I'm going away for 2 weeks for work. Why don't you, like, instead of playing video games forever, try to make this podcast? And I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. So I did, and I wrote to somebody for advice. His name was Jeff Greiner. He has a podcast called The Tome Show. And he said, your show sounds really interesting. Do you want to come do it on my feed? And he already had like a built-in audience and everything. And so when I did that, I thought I should have something that I can direct this audience to. And so I started blogging then. So at the end of the podcast, I could say, go to the blog, check out what I'm doing over here. And I started to design things first for systems that I knew pretty well, like Dungeons and Dragons. And then through that, I built up like a library of stuff, and I started to get more involved in the community, trading ideas, tweeting out things that I had done, and it sort of built from there. I was able to then get work from there because people had seen what I had done, and I was also confident enough to start making my own products, and that work led to other work, and it kind of went from there.
Awesome. Chris, what about you?
So I've been gaming almost since I was 6 or 7, and then one year I actually got to go to Gen Con. And I was promoting my idea for Harlem Unbound even back then, saying, hey, I have this great idea for this book about sort of inclusion, about Harlem, and I'm going to take like the entire Cthulhu mythos in the 20s and roll it all up into one thing. And people would sort of nod their head and go, yeah, sure, that sounds like an idea. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, you know what, if no one else is going to do it, I'll publish it myself. And before I could do that, I actually met Robin Laws at Gen Con one year. And I said, Robin, I know you don't know me, but I have this idea about something. And he said, hey, Skype me when I'm not at Gen Con on the floor surrounded by 100 people and we can talk. And so one night at a Skype call with Robin, and then he put me in touch with Simon the Cat. And that's when I started working a little freelance gigs at Pelgrane Press. And I learned some of the basics, and I sort of started putting my toes into the industry. And based on that, I went to Metatopia. I met some amazing people. And when I decided to kickstart Harlem Unbound by myself, that's when I really stepped into the industry. And people said, hey, we know you. You're the guy that's pissing us all off. and people keep hiring me sometimes to do work for some reason that I don't understand.
Oh, that's awesome. So both of you are self-made, and that's really cool. It's great for younger audiences because that's kind of how people have been able to do their own work, is through the internet and through vlogging and blogging and just setting up their own projects and producing their own work. And it's really nice to see that all of that work actually does pay off, that it can go somewhere, because I know tons of creators put hours and hours into producing their own stuff. So that's amazing. So congratulations to both of you. You obviously, you deserve all this success. But that's really great.
So it sounds like so James, you have worked a lot in existing IP, with some of the work you've done with Wizards and some of the other stuff. And Chris, you can probably talk to this as well, but for you, do you feel like there's a difference in, developing either books or supplemental material or what have you for existing worlds as opposed to your own stuff that you've come up with yourself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's also true of like, when you are working in existing IP, you're usually working then for someone who has become the guardian of that IP, right? So your role is very different, but even for the people at the top, it's very different. Like working on Burn Bright, which was a totally original thing, and it was kind of like make whatever you want, and that's how Burn Bright happened. Is very different than when somebody like Chris Perkins says, I have this idea for this story, but it takes place in the Forgotten Realms, which has existed forever and has, 30, 40 years of canon that we need to keep in mind and stay true to. But at the same time, we need to also remember that this is going to be somebody's first time playing a role-playing game, so we can't rely on them having known all that, right? Like there is a lot more what in television we would refer to as brand cuffs kind of there that keep you put more strict parameters on you. And that's a blessing in some ways because you're like, I know what this is. I know exactly what Eberron is. I know how to write for it. Everything's there. And I can just tell this cool story that I've wanted to tell in Eberron, right, for a while. But there's also then you run up against the like, I can't, I want to do this, but I can't because this isn't a thing in this universe. Luckily, I do think we're fortunate in tabletop games in that like there is this ethos of like, a lot of tabletop games tell stories about exceptions, right? Like this exceptional thing that is currently happening, right? That's what stories are. It's about like, whoa, this weird thing that happened. So you can usually get around some of that in that way, but it all has to be approved by the shepherds of that brand, right?
Oh, yeah.
And by the keepers of that brand. And when you do your own thing, the opposite is like, you are the shepherd. And you're probably still working with other people. And I'll let Chris talk about that because I think Chris has been doing that more than I have.
I guess much to what James said, it's a lot of figuring out how to interact with the vision that the actual IP holder's guardian has, because no matter how brilliant or whatever your idea may be, they still need to find a way to have it adhere to the established history, and the person that they have to turn it over to will agree with it. And a lot of things can sometimes get lost in translation. And part of the problem, sorry, excuse me, I found with working with existing IP is that there is a dearth of knowledge that has to be acquired to compensate for what you don't really know and how you can apply it in a way that someone else whose first scenario adventure this might be can understand it, but then still keep the people that have read every single book for the past 40 years engaged with it.
Yes.
The Star Wars syndrome.
I was just going to say the Star Wars Extended Universe, and now we're going to decanonize fans across the world, or yeah.
I may have made a nod toward the Force, but I didn't say it.
It's okay. We said it.
Right.
We love you, Disney. Disney, you're amazing, and we love Star Wars. But.
Yeah, we all love Metachlorians. We can agree here that Metachlorians were the best thing to happen to Star Wars.
Totally.
Yes.
Since Yoda.
I mean,
Like,
it just is when you have something, when you have an IP that is so well known and so beloved, you are always going to have to fight that battle no matter what. And it just is a problem that will come up every single time, is how do you introduce new people without overwhelming them? And how do you keep, audiences like the very, like, in the thick of it, how do you keep the fans happy and engaged still by giving them little Easter eggs and things? So it is kind of that double-edged sword where you don't want the fans to be like, oh, we're treading old ground here, and like this is just not what I signed up for. And then you got the other the newbies who come in and they're like, oh my God, what is this? There's so many rules. There's so many things. Do I have to remember the date of this war? I don't know. So again, it's that double-edged sword. So yeah, I can sympathize with that dilemma.
Because I know, for instance, working with Dune, part of the issue was Dune has such an established canon, and the holders of the Dune IP are very, very particular about what they want to include and what they don't want to include. So it was interesting watching Modiphius sort of interact with them to figure out what they could and couldn't put in, and have them sort of filter that down to the writers, who at the same time said, I want to include this great thing, to hear, that is over here in this gray area that you may see something about in a year or two.
Right.
And then have to find a way. But that was the crux of my entire thing.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to step on the toes of the movie that's coming out too, and so you don't.
Yeah.
God, that's gotta be difficult.
No, you're right, Genevieve. That's a huge consideration, right? Especially if there's a product, right, that ties into something, you may find yourself like, hey, it's not just the publisher of this thing, right? It's
Right.
also CBS if you're writing in the Star Trek universe that you need to answer to, or hey, we've got a video game tie-in, and so we've got to make sure that we hit like this video game thing. But again, not everybody's going to have played the video game. So how do we hint at this without doing that? There's a lot of demands there. And it's like part of your job, right, as the writer, is to be like, okay, how do I make this work? It's great to be an artist, right, and to have those moments of like, yes, I can create everything, but you do build your relationship too by working with other people, and you can have some fun, I think, rising to those challenges and turning those parameters and guideposts into something interesting and useful. But you do have to get out of your own way a little bit, which sometimes can stink, especially when you're like, wow, I had this great idea and now I'm not allowed to do it. That's
right.
the worst.
And that brings up an interesting point, because I know, Chris, like you had mentioned, you kind of got known as the person who's pissing everyone off, and one of your big focuses has been expanding inclusivity in the tabletop gaming world. And that's something Genevieve and I have talked about on the show a lot, be it for women, be it for people of color, be it for the LGBTQ plus community. It's like, it used to seem like tabletop gaming was very much a certain segment of the population playing that. And I mean, I'm not going to say anything, James, but
This guy.
that guy. But it seems like things have expanded a lot, over the past couple of years. But for you, Chris, I mean, was that a motivating factor for you, or was that just something, you're like, oh, I didn't see myself represented in gaming and now I want to do this? Or was it like, I am on a mission?
My primary focus is to increase diversity and inclusion in gaming. That's what I stepped into it for. That's why the first product that my company made was Harlem Unbound. That was the specific target name. And whenever I work for another company, I always try to do something to sort of push that bar a little bit more to see how far they will let me go with it, and then push them a little bit more than they're comfortable with.
Right.
And I know a large part of it is I didn't see myself in a lot of different games when I was growing up. Like the first thing I had the red box set way back in the day, and there were elves and everything else, but there weren't any people that looked like me. And then I really got into Call of Cthulhu later on, which is a story in and of itself. And there was definitely no one that looked like me often. And then when they were not represented in a positive light.
Yeah, that's a very interesting little niche.
Well, and obviously Wizards recently had, the announcement about like, hey, we're getting rid of our whole, alignment thing because, and, one of the games we have on our network, it's specifically every character in the game is a quote unquote evil race, but they're not, because it's like, I mean, this orc is just trying to pay for, his family, and this goblin over here is just, trying to trade, and now we're dead. I mean, you're attacking us. So, that it's whole concept of, yeah, exactly. It's not a binary, world that we live in. So it should not necessarily be a binary game that we are playing.
I mean, it's very much like The Witcher. It's all about perspective. And
right.
So, but yeah,
do we want to talk about representation or lack thereof in The Witcher?
I mean, yeah, there's well,
I'm speaking specifically more about the game right now than anything else.
Yeah, the game.
God, the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the game. The game has a lot. Okay, so the game has a lot of issues.
But I mean,
that span beyond representation.
But for you, Chris, and even James, in the work that you are doing, how do you go about remedying that? I mean, it's getting better, but I mean, do you see most of the progress coming from people saying, I'm making my own game that's going to have more representation, or, hey, I'm going to write this expansion pack for Wizards or for whomever and increase the diversity through that? Like, where do you think the progress?
James,
yeah.
Do you mind if I take point?
Oh, please. I think the best thing that I can do is listen. So go ahead.
So for me, one of the biggest things is that if you want to increase diversity and inclusion, that means hiring a more diverse and inclusive staff for the people working on the project. And I don't mean like 1 or 2 people. I mean, try to diversify your team as much as possible. And then when you have those people on your staff, you actually have to listen to their input and value it. And the objective is not to have them be on the team, but to be leading teams and then having like their vision of what this thing is. And it doesn't have to be based on whatever their marginalized experience is, because they bring that to anything they're doing. And you shouldn't put people into a box. I'm only bringing you on to write this one aspect of the game because I need to have it appear like I'm doing this thing. You should be giving people control and creative input to change the entire scope of your project. You bring them on at like the very beginning, and then it shapes something that becomes something better. It's almost like music that you're all playing together.
I love that. That's beautiful. I love that. The chat loves that too.
Thanks, chat. I'll be here all week.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of silly because the audience has always been there, you know, and so it's kind of funny when you know, when developers and people that are heading projects don't really take their audience into consideration when they're making things, you know. Like I mean, I have tons of friends from all walks of life that, you know, just love gaming. I think it's human to love gaming because gaming is a community in which you get together with your friends and, you know, you have an experience. So I think that's, you know, that's a human experience.
Yeah.
So and we all share in that. So yes, thank you, Chris. I mean, that's important.
So sorry, Genevieve, did you have something?
No, I don't.
So James, did you have something?
Oh no, I was just gonna say there are many awesome creators like Chris who have amazing work that is winning all kinds of awards that more people need to buy and play too. So definitely like go out and buy Harlem Unbound, buy Bolt, you know, buy Mutants in the Night. There are all of these amazing RPGs that are out there that also then help people make their living and make more great games doing this, and also then, you know, help them get recognized so that they can get these awesome leadership positions. So that's just my 2 cents too, is like go buy awesome games being made by great creators that are out there.
And to tag onto that, sort of our Voltron moment here, or Wonder Twins if you want. Not only should you buy their work, you should be retweeting them or like doing as much social media press for these people as you can, because the reach that you can put out is greater than what any individual single creator can do. And that sort of exposes their work and them to an entirely new audience of people that may engage with whatever it is they're trying to create. And go out of your way, I'm sorry, but like to retweet the person with the smallest number of followers, because if they get 4 new followers, that is enormous for them and could be life-changing compared to someone that has 15 or 20,000 followers who get hundreds of likes regardless of what it is.
Yeah.
Right. Social media has proven to be so important for self-promotion and promoting any sort of product these days. Let's just jump into that. So how have you guys used segue? How have you guys used social media to promote yourself, and how important has it been to you as opposed to face-to-face interactions? I mean, I have found that face-to-face interactions are probably like the heavy hitters, the things that people are going to remember, but on the surface level, getting the word out there, social media is just,
especially now,
you can't buy that kind of press, especially if you go viral.
So it is RPG Twitter, right, is out there, and RPG Facebook, and RPG TikTok. All of those things exist. I know for me, Twitter has been a great place where I have found a lot of jobs through Twitter. Like actually my first gig with Wizards of the Coast, Chris Perkins DM'd me through Twitter and was like, "Hey James, I do you have anything that I could check out?" And so I sent him something, and then a month later he was like, "Do you want to work on Dragon Heist?" And I see people like talk about on Twitter and in Facebook groups, "Hey, is there a great editor that I can hire for this? Does anybody know who's a great cartographer who can make great maps?" So I think it's good for connecting people. But I also think conventions are pretty important. So you don't have to be in like a huge social media expert to make it in RPGs. But you do have to want to talk to people, I think.
You have to socialize every once in a while. Don't tell me that. I want to be successful, James, without talking to anybody about it.
I mean, I do want that.
I want to be successful and to be left alone.
Yeah, there you go.
How can I do that?
That's how you know you've made it, is when you no longer have to talk to people and you still get.
So you've got to work up to the being left alone point. Got it.
The dream.
What about for you, Chris? Because obviously, you know, you've had a lot of your own stuff come out. I mean,
I think for myself, probably a lot of other indie creators, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing without social media.
yeah.
Mhm.
Literally, like for me, trying to get another publisher to publish Harlem Unbound was an impossible task. And I had to build up a fan base and a following of people that really wanted to be a part of it. So when I Kickstarted it, it would be successful.
Right.
Because without that, I could have put it up on Kickstarter and I would have got $50 and it went, yay, I have a Word document.
The best feeling.
And so it's, as much as it is a great thing, conventions are useful. I myself am in the crowd of I would rather sit in a bunker and write and like show you what I've written than go to a convention and engage.
Right.
I'm a writer.
Yeah. So for both of you, I mean, you've had very different journeys getting to where you are, but you both obviously have the same passion. And there's probably no one right answer, but for people who are interested in getting into this industry, either as, you know, writers or, you know, supplemental designers, or, you know, they have their own idea for a game, what suggestions do you have for people?
Yeah, I do think getting involved in the community is a big part of it, and sort of circling back to what Chris had said about sharing people's things, I think giving as much or more to the community as you get out of it is really important. Like wanting to be part of the community, actually liking people, supporting them, reading the work of other creators, spending some money and playing the games, spending time playing the games of other creators is really, really important. And then on the other side is like, you've got to find the time to work on your craft too. And so for me, blogging really helped because I had that mentality of like, I need to build an audience. I need to put out stuff every week. So I need to have a post every week ready to go. So I have to have something to write about. And that sort of gave me that self-imposed deadline of like, write. And then when the deadline hits is when it's done, because especially when you're not secure about what you're doing and you're first starting out, I would just still be working on that first blog post if I had never said like, it needs to come out Tuesday. Right. Yeah. And so giving yourself deadlines and doing that, and then getting involved in the community and sharing your work with that community and looking at other people's work, I think is really, it's sort of this cyclical relationship that will help make you a better writer and then get you involved in more projects.
Absolutely agree. Except for, I think regardless of how experienced you are, you'll always want to have that urge to keep tweaking your work to make it that much better, but it will never be perfect. And someone will always find something they don't like about it.
Don't tell me that, Chris.
It's how it's going to go.
Criticism.
That's true. But even
part of it is building up a thick enough skin so that when you get that criticism, whether rightly or I just don't like your face, you're able to like take it and figure out how to process it. There could be something useful in there that you can take into yourself and then still use to help elevate the work that you're trying to make, because no one's perfect, like in the story. But my biggest advice would be that you believe in yourself. because whatever you're making, no one else is going to care about that nearly as much as you do. And at the end of the day, when it's 1 a.m. and you've been up for 12 hours working on this 4 lines of text to try to get it right, everyone else is asleep. They're not thinking about you and what you're doing. So your only motivation is whatever you're listening to and getting this thing out that you want the world to see.
Now, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm going to think of you, Chris, and that you're sitting at your computer looking at 4 lines of text for 12 hours. And I'm going to be like, oh, he thinks no one's thinking of him, but I am, because that sounds like a hell of a world to live in.
I may point out that I was working on one paragraph for the magic section today for Haunted West for about 3 hours because it wouldn't quite come together with some of the mechanics I wanted to use.
Oh, God.
While my team was, I think someone sent me a picture of them eating like a brioche out on their porch. And someone else, that was another part of the world, was like, hey, it's beer time. What are you doing?
Right.
Like, curse you. You're not allowed to have fun if I'm not having fun.
Well, that's the hard thing with anyone who's in like the creative, in some sort of the creative industry, is like, you know, and I've joked with this with friends, like, oh, finding that work life, you know, that work-life balance. And I'm like, I kind of feel like there's no delineation between the two. And I'm like, maybe that's just not healthy, or it's just how I am. But because especially if you're creating your own stuff, and like James, you said, you need, you know, deadlines really helped with you. But especially when you're getting started, you do have to just grind. And
Yeah.
that's just a part of what it is, to get where you need to go. And hopefully you do get to that point where it's like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna take the weekend off and I'm not gonna think about this and I'm not gonna write. But
Lindsay, how do you do it? I can confirm that the work-life balance for me, as you know, as an independent business person, it's non-existent. Like the lines blur. If I need to do my dishes in between sewing a thing, I'll do that, and then I'll come back to it. I'm like, I'm still working, right? I mean, like, what about you two? Like with Chris, how is work-life balance for you?
With
does that work?
And child and other work.
Can you do it? Is it possible?
I'm a project manager in my day job, so I've learned how to put things in tiny buckets and try to address them when I can. But in the back of my brain, it's always working. I'm always like figuring out a problem, and if I'm working on a project, like right now, since I'm working on a Western, I'm listening to a lot of Western music. Like, for instance, my Spotify top 100 came up today, and the top 10 songs were all 50 Western songs, most of them by Marty Robbins. And so I'm always like ingesting information to then think about it, to figure out how to process it. So when I get time to actually write or create or have like a project team meeting, I can sit down and it'll just flow, instead of me going, well, let me take out my note sheet and see what we got to do today, team.
Right.
That's really smart. That's and in that sense, you're kind of always working then, because you're kind of always at least thinking about it and processing, right? Yeah. And like when your hobby becomes your side gig or your full-time gig, it really does always feel like even when I play a game, it's a very different experience playing a game now than it was before I, didn't see The Matrix when I sat down to play.
I know.
But it is, yeah. And I feel very fortunate because I am going to, go and do this as kind of like a full-time thing. But it is a thing that you do need to figure out how to juggle, and you do need to figure out, I think one step in like doing this is figuring out, like, do you actually want to do this? As is with any creative pursuit. And that's okay, right? Like, it's okay to think, I just want this to be my hobby. We do need some people to go make actual money and then buy books. So that's totally fine if you decide you want to go be a banker and support the hobby in a different way. I'm cool with that.
Well, and that's a really interesting point. And maybe this is something you guys can talk to. What is something or some things that you came to realize was kind of part and parcel with the work as you delved into this work? Because I know a lot of people are like, oh, Lindsay, you do voiceover. I want to do voiceover. That sounds fun. And I'm like, yeah, the 1% of the time I spend in the studio is amazing. The 99% of the time that I'm training and marketing and all this other is like not always so much fun. But, you know, as you guys were getting into this, what are some things that you realized that you're like, oh, now I have to do this and this and this, and that's not necessarily part of the actual creative zone that you are in, which is, you know, what you love doing?
So the business management aspect of it. One of the biggest hurdles that, at least for me, was figuring out shipping. Shipping is like this magical thing that changes every other hour. Even before 2020, because you would have to figure out how to ship things internationally, and you're trying to find the best rates for people, and you're trying to find the right price at the bottom line for the best efficiency to make as many people happy as you can while still making a little bit of a profit to be able to pay the people doing the work for you and maybe be able to afford to buy yourself a coffee at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a lot of the creative time and energy out of you to sort of do the business aspects of it.
Yeah.
I have to say that shipping is the worst part of my job. I hate it. I hate the thought of having to do it. You've just given me so many like nom flashbacks with with shipping. It's terrible.
Yeah.
So James, what about you?
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely that there's when you, especially when you work for yourself, you are a business now, right? You are a brand, whether or not you have registered for a business, which
I'm
is,
an LLC.
Yeah, exactly.
This chair here.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually incorporated, which is a whole other thing. And I don't recommend if you don't have to do it. But yeah, so there is this whole business aspect to it. And I think the other thing to remember is that like game design, tabletop game design is way more like making a video game, making a game, than it is like writing a book, right? Like you write, and when you write the words for the book, a lot of what you're writing is programming language, right? You're making sure all your rules fit together, and if you're making an original system or that kind of thing, you're writing the language as you are programming in it. And then you get play testers, and there's artists, and there's, you know, all these other things that you are managing that are not necessarily part of the gig. Other writers, editors, proofreaders, right? And that when you open up an RPG and you see that long list of names, that is why that book costs more than like a novel that might be a similar length, because all of those people deserve to be paid for their work. You know, and so it is trying to shift that mentality of like, you're not a novelist, you're a game designer, you're writing a game, right? And then the other part of your job then is to shift the consumer's mindset that you're not buying a book, you're buying a game. And that takes, well, I'll let you know when that's done, because I'm still working on it.
You're buying an experience.
That
exactly
is so true. We have a great question in chat. So Chris, earlier you had mentioned, you know, when you entered a job, pushing the limits of inclusion, and that sometimes that makes people uncomfortable. And I guess for both of you, when you are, you know, doing that, when do you know you've pushed too far or too much, or you've gone too far? How do you find that balance?
Is it the point where you get coffee thrown in your face?
Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, you want me to take that one first?
I don't mind.
No, I got it now. So one of the things when you know that you've done it too much is when they no longer contact you to be a freelancer.
Oof, that hurts.
Another sort of thing is when part of the process is you get a lot of red lines back, and if all of their red lines are specifically targeting things, that's sort of like an indicator that something is amiss, and that's a good time to have a conversation and try to like reestablish whatever your baseline is. Yeah. I would say that I've never been cursed out by anyone as of yet. But I have had people that will no longer engage me as a freelancer, which I'm fine with. if you don't want to promote inclusion, I don't want to work with you anyway. So we're both happier.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta know what your, well, no, I mean, you gotta know what your limits are, but also like not compromise the beliefs and the ideals that are fundamental to who you are and what you're trying to do. That I totally, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like, for instance, I had a content reader sort of going over some of the different parts for Haunted West for me, because it's a big project and takes a lot of people to pull this off right. And one of their comments was, you don't need to say that. Everyone that picks up a Chris Spivey book knows the book that they're buying. And like that sort of stuck with me. And then that lets me know that whatever it is I'm doing or I'm trying to do, I'm at least doing it correctly, if not accurately.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really
gotta be a good feeling.
Yeah.
just to have that, like, my name is recognized as this specific thing or this specific goal or brand. That's cool.
Yeah, I agree with Chris when you said that about like people stop calling you, but then you don't want to work with them anyway. I feel the same exact way, especially in an industry that has a lot of DIY spirit and a lot of people who are willing to look at and work with creators and back creators. Like I think there are times where you might be working a job and you may realize after the fact, like, oh, I could have made more doing my own thing. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind in the back of your head is like, if you're working with someone and the experience is miserable and that person does not share the values that you share, and like, hey, when you hired me, I made it very clear that this is where I stand and you're trying to push me in this other direction. Like, don't give them your name. You don't want your name on that product anyway. So yeah.
So for both of you, what was your motivation to want to become world builders, to become storytellers, to do this crazy thing that you are doing?
Chris, please.
Oh no, I take the last one first. This one's already.
I feel like this is an easy one.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I have always loved telling stories, and I've always loved telling, playing with action figures, and the fact that like you could take the X-Men and have them meet Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and mix up worlds and tell something totally different. And so for me, that's been a really big thing, right? Is like, I love watching stories and consuming stories, but what I really like is telling and creating my own in all different forms of play. And I have never enjoyed or been good at like sports or that kind of thing. And when I did theater, I enjoyed theater most when I was writing the plays, right? And writing the sketches and doing improv and creating and that kind of thing. So it's kind of always been storytelling has always been part of what I have really liked to do and what I've done in my free time and with friends and stuff. And I think it's a big draw of role-playing games, right? Like the people who like to be game masters, it's because we enjoy creating worlds with our friends, and you take that to another level when you are game designing, because now you're creating a world that you are egotistical enough to believe other people are going to want to play in.
Right.
So yeah, I feel like it's something that's just kind of always been there. It's a thing that I feel like I would do by myself in my brain if I wasn't doing it on paper for other people to see.
Right. Chris?
Ditto. So I've always been a voracious reader at a young age, and part of that's just sort of sparked my imagination early on. And I think I officially wrote my first novel, because I wanted to be a novelist, actually, by the time I was 9. It was great. It was all like in my spiral bound notebook. It's about 200 pages. It's still floating around here somewhere. And when I actually got more into gaming, the two sort of merged into one. I wanted to be able to tell creatively interactive stories, because you can tell a story in a way that changes and evolves with the people that you're playing with, and you're making an experience that all of you at this one instance and table are living through. And it's teaching you a little bit about each other at the same time as you're making this world. And there weren't a lot of worlds in any of the fictions or books that I saw that were representative of me and my experience. And I wanted to create worlds that had my experience and hopefully other people's experiences, to get more people into storytelling, and they can build their own worlds. And then we can have a richer history of stories that we all share.
So what you're telling me is that next week is going to be a live reading of your first novel here on the show, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
Because
You're your first, folks.
At home.
Well, that brings up a really good, interesting question. Again, the chat is loving all of this. When you are creating these worlds and these universes and this original, stuff that you're doing, you've mentioned, people are always going to have critiques and criticisms, but especially like Chris, if we are talking about inclusivity, how are you consciously thinking like, okay, I really don't want to offend anyone with this, or, ooh, that might push someone the wrong way. Like, how do you go about developing these worlds and universes without, trying to, not like you're deliberately trying to, offend someone, but, keeping that in mind, like how to avoid that as much as possible, if it is even possible.
It's not possible.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I figured.
Do the best that you can, but you also don't do it alone. You bring in other people with other experiences, especially the experiences you're hoping to encapsulate in the book. For instance, in Haunted West, I'm trying to tell the stories of the forgotten people of the Old West, which is an incredibly diverse amalgamation of folks. And I brought in probably the most diverse team of creatives to help with this project, I think, that I've seen, at least on any other Western RPG, but possibly on most other RPG books. Yeah. And I had them sort of like, some of them are content readers, some of them are writers. I tried to get everyone at some point to write on the book about different experiences, some of their own, some that would be someone else's, and have all those perspectives sort of intermingled. And when the book's finished, I even put this out to my backers recently that I'm taking longer, because once everything is good enough, because it won't be perfect for me, I hired additional layer of sensitivity readers that I want to send the book out to, and then have all of those people go through everything that we've already carefully tried to craft. And then I will know that I put the best effort forward I can to make it as engaging and not offensive, but yet still promoting my mission as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
James, for you, yeah.
Oh, ditto on all that, right? Like higher sensitivity readers, higher content readers, higher a diverse writing team, a diverse editing team, artists. That's nail on the head for me, right? Like you've got to do the best that you can, and you've got to put your best foot forward. And I think, there's certain content that we all know, like, yeah, probably don't do that. But there's a lot of things out there that we don't know because we have only our individual experience. And so bring in as many people as possible. Plus, then it's like you get to share the load and make new friends, and it's awesome.
Right.
And part of it also reaches the point that at some time we all have to come to the table in good faith. And if we're not going to do that, there's no way, regardless of what we do, will ever work.
Mm.
Yeah. Wow. You guys have I feel like there's so many knowledge bombs being dropped right now. I'm just contemplating all of my life choices as we speak. So, okay, for both of you, you've got a lot going on. James, you're about to start a brand new job. Chris, you were in the middle of developing stuff. What are some things that you really want to do that you haven't done yet?
Ooh. So it's funny because I probably have a list the size of, my arm in 9-point font of projects that I could make that I just won't ever get to before I expire from this world. So because I do think part of it is constantly thinking of and generating things. But for me, I really want to tackle at some point a superhero role-playing game. Because I love superheroes. It's like one of my favorite genres. And I often find with superhero RPGs, I end up in this place of like, you can do whatever you want, but it's super duper complex because they made it so you can build whatever you want. Or it's like super broad and every power kind of feels the same. And I want to find that in between. So that is my Moby Dick out there.
Hey, James, you know, we've been talking about we need a project together.
We have been.
Do you know that I am a massive superhero fan, right? I've been reading comics forever. I may have written some superhero stuff. Yeah, we gotta have a talk.
Do it. I would love to chat.
I am so excited about this right now. And if you're ever needing play testers or, you know, people to provide input, I'm just gonna say we are always available for those.
So again,
for anyone that doesn't know, superheroes is my favorite genre, followed by sci-fi.
Okay.
What is your
you have a superhero
comic
project in your future as well, or I guess the two of you together?
Comic, I would say recently I really like the Ultimates with Blue Marvel and the rest of the team. Mm-hmm. Really well written. That was some like epic sort of storytelling and outside the box stuff to it.
Yeah.
I wish I could say like that's my favorite too, but I haven't read a comic and I'm so far behind. I think when DC tried to turn over their stuff with the New 52, I was just like, I need to go away for a while and reread some of my Vertigos, some of the Vertigo titles. But yeah, I catch up. So
go for it, Jennifer.
I mean, you both have been very successful at making your own content and, you know, getting the word out there and making names for yourselves. What would you say was the biggest stumbling block to get to where you are now? Like, what was the one thing that you just really had to work so hard at to just make it?
Systemic racism.
That's a big
and I'm out.
Yeah. It's
that
you should have let James go first. Nothing's ever gonna compare now.
He had some easy ones to start with. I wanted to make it a little harder for him.
That's true. Thank you. I appreciate that. That rising to the challenge. So you know, a big thing for me is just you just got to find the time to do it. And like for me, when I started doing stuff, I stopped like playing video games a lot and that kind of thing. So again, all of this pales in comparison to systemic racism, certainly.
But if it makes you feel better, I too have not been able to play video games how I want.
It actually just makes me feel worse. But I really do think that you know, again, asking yourself, like, is this something that I really want to do? I think is really, really important. And I think it also goes to show that when it comes to systemic racism, right? Like if my biggest thing is like, ooh, I had to give up video games, Chris had to do that and overcome systemic racism, which is still a problem all the time. Like, we should probably all be doing our part then to be anti-racist and also doing everything Chris said about uplifting voices and uplifting creators who don't look like me. You know, I get very uplifted and have no problem with that and that kind of thing. So let's do all that we can to change that.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, on that note, we're at the end of our hour.
Oh my God.
I know, right? I'm just like, wait, we get to talk for like 2 more hours, right? Okay, guys, we're canceling Realms of Ukador tonight. I'm sorry, we're announcing this right now. We're gonna keep talking with these guys, so we'll catch up with them next week.
Chris and I are about to develop a superhero RPG live in front of everybody.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. All right, let's do it.
Next week.
Next week.
What age of comics are you we're not gonna do it now.
I was just gonna say next week is the live reading of Chris's first novel and the first round table of the superhero RPG. Clearly.
Yeah, but for realsies, I can't believe I just said that. No, we would absolutely love to have both of you guys come back on anytime and talk about superhero RPGs, systemic racism, inclusivity, all of this. I love it so much. And apparently the chat is as well. So yeah. So I guess real quick before we sign off, do you have anything you want to promote right now or where people can find you?
Shameless plug time, guys.
Shameless plug time.
Make it count.
Sure, Chris, please, by all means.
Follow me on Twitter. I'm darker@_Hugh. I would like to break 4,000 followers someday, so that'd be a nice perk. But otherwise, please pre-order Haunted West. We're putting a lot of work into it, and I promise you one day it'll come out. I'll be happy enough with it. Maybe.
Yeah, and I am at James Introcaso on Twitter, and worldbuilderblog.com has a bunch of links to things that I have written that you can check out, including Burn Bright, which is BRYTE. So go check that out.
Awesome. Okay, well, we have Realms of Ukador coming up in 30 minutes here at 6:30. We do have a raffle code, but I don't know what it is. Eddie, are you listening? What's the raffle code? Oh, wait, do we have it? Raffle. Okay, great. So type raffle into the chat and Chris will announce it when Realms of Ukador starts at 6:30. Thank you guys so much for joining us, chat. Thank you so much for your amazing questions and for being part of the conversation. And yeah.
Take care.
Yeah.